Peace be upon you all. I am teacher Hussein Bahja, and I'd like to welcome you today to our new literary element, which is foreshadowing. Our objectives for today are to identify the 6 common signals of foreshadowing and then to identify examples of foreshadowing in a story. To begin with, what is foreshadowing? It is a literary element in which a writer gives an advance hint of what is to come later in the story. Writers use clues to suggest future actions in the story. Actually, they tell us through foreshadowing what to expect in the story. It gives an idea of what to come, for example, like a sign. To clarify my point, take a look at this picture. Though there is a sign, a danger sign that should prevent the girl from climbing, there is a kind of unsettling smile on her face. So you as an audience predict that the girl is thinking of climbing over the fence. Another example, I want you to take a look at the picture of this man, and I want you to imagine that you are reading the following words. He promised to come back with a bit of uncertainty in his voice. Actually, the author here gives a clue for the reader that the climber might not be coming back home. Usually, it is associated with suspense, and it may help answer previous suspicions or open up new ones, suspicions that are related to the plot of the story. Why is it important? Actually, it is important for 2 main reasons. One, to hold the plot together. Actually, plots should have sort of logical progression. We need to have a kind of cause and effect relationship, or characters that exist in their ordinary world, and then something pushes them to move along their hero journey path. For example, in the story that we have taken this year, The Gift of the Magi, the writer tells us that Della is poor and the only valuable item she has is her hair. He gives us a hint that the only way Della can get money is to sell her hair. Or it might also explain the end of the story or even the climax. Moreover, foreshadowed items might hold clues to the theme. So here is the how do I find foreshadowing. Well, we need to look for these 6 common signals: dreams, warnings, overconfidence or arrogance of a character, abundant attention, static characters, and the presence of prophets or wizards. The first foreshadowing signal is the idea of dreams. When we say dreams, we mean the time when the character is asleep, daydreaming, or even wandering, and the narrator describes the dream. The point is, when we see, as readers, a dream that a character is having, then most likely the thing they are dreaming or thinking about is going to matter in the story or even come true. For example, in God Sees the Truth But Waits, Aksionov's wife tells her husband that she is afraid of a bad dream she had. She told him, "I dreamt you returned from the town And when you took off your cap, I saw that your hair was quite gray. This dream foreshadows that something bad will happen to Aksyonov in his trip. The next signal is when characters give warnings, and again, not all warnings are direct, like I warn you. They can have the variation of a character pointing out something or even giving an advice about something because maybe they have experienced something like that before. Like dreams, when a character warns another or gives him a piece of advice, this means that this warning or pieces of advice tend to matter later in the story. One example is a warning from the monkey's paw. In the monkey's paw, the sergeant takes the paw and throws it in the fire, and when Mr. White snatches it off the fire and seems determined to keep it, the sergeant tells him, "If you keep it, don't blame me for what happens. Pitch it on the fire again like a sensible man." The warning here and the piece of advice foreshadow that something really bad will happen because of that paw. Our third signal is overconfidence or arrogance. It is the idea of hubris. It is when the character is very arrogant, overconfident, or when he actually crossed the line. When we see characters who are overconfident or filled with hubris, that hubris often leads to the character's downfall. There is something about the universe that enjoys the character that is confident, but there seems to be a line when the character crosses that line and moves from being confident to overconfident. It is like the universe actually wants to bring him down. That hubris foreshadows that the character will struggle in the end. A great example is from the story The Scarlet Ibis. It is when Doodle's brother begins to believe in his unlimited abilities and his own infallibility. We expect that this overconfidence he has will lead to serious problems, and actually, this is what happens since he causes Doodle's tragic death. Our fourth signal is what we call abundant attention. Now, this is when the author continues to return to a certain idea, action, object, or even color throughout a text. We are forced to see it several times as the author repeats it over and over. This repetition, or when we are directed to look at something because of the attention given by the author, foreshadows something that will happen later in the story. One example is in our story, The Gift of the Magi. The author gives abundant attention on the idea that the couple are poor and the only valuable items they have are Della's hair and Jim's watch. This repetition foreshadows that the only way they can get money is to sell their valuable properties in order to gift each other later. One more signal of foreshadowing is the idea of static characters. Static characters are those characters that do not change throughout a text or a story. They start and end a text as fundamentally as the same character with the same character traits. And that notion of not changing foreshadows how they will behave at the end of a text. The last signal is the idea of a prophet, a wizard, or even a fortune teller. So, if we have a character who is called a prophet, a fortune teller, or someone who is said to have visions, we know that whatever comes out of their mouth or say is going to matter later in the story because we, as readers, believe that they have some mystic abilities to see the future. Finally, I'd like to remind you that foreshadowing is a literary element in which a writer gives an advance hint of what is to come later in the story. And we talked about the 6 common signals of foreshadowing, which are dreams, warnings, overconfidence of a character, abundant attention given by the author, static characters, and prophets and wizards. Finally, it is assignment time. What are the signals of foreshadowing used in the story The Monkey's Paw? Explain. Thank you for watching. May God bless you all.